This is the video for class number 9 on March 28th. Here is a passage from Persephone, and I'm following here an important article by an important Stravinsky scholar named Gretchen Horlacher. She shows that this passage consists of 5 statements of an ostinato. That is, the melody is the same in all 5 sections, but the other parts change. So we find ourselves in a somewhat strange harmonic environment. On the one hand, things are incredibly static and motionless. And the ostinato is a kind of guarantee that things are going nowhere at this point. At the same time, there's subtle shading in the non-ostinato parts that create a sense of what Horlacher calls formal development. So this tension between stasis on the one hand and development on the other. I won't say more about this now. We'll explore this issue together in class. Here is the opening section of Stravinsky's Symphony in C. I will listen to the recording now, and I will point things out as we go. Even before we start, however, I'll point out that the piece begins with a 3-note motto, as I'm calling it, B, C, G, that 3-note motto. There's a kind of answer to the motto, D, E, B, the motto again, the answer again, the answer again, the answer again. The 3-note motto then occurs up in this part here. It's going to occur a moment later in the bass, and then a first theme will begin for this sonata form movement. 3-note motto, what I'm calling the answer. 3-note motto, answer, answer repeats a third time, scales. 3-note motto expanded a bit. Another statement, finally all the way down in the bass, and then the first theme begins. First theme is diverted to D minor. And the first theme is going to come again in D minor in just a moment, but I'll pass over that for now. Let's look a little more closely at this 3-note motto and the tonal answer. And my question is going to be, what key is this motto imply? Taking just the motto itself first, well, it's a symphony in C, and so there's a strong sense in which, well, this motto isn't simply in C major. There's the leading tone, there's the tonic, and then it jumps down to the dominant. But it's kind of weird for a piece in C. I mean, the emphasis here is all on the B, and actually the C sounds a bit like a non-harmonic tone, like an échappé. So really, maybe the harmonic tones here are G and B, and we're in maybe G major, or more likely, as it turns out, E minor. So impregnated within this 3-note motto is a kind of tonal ambiguity between C and E. And as we'll see, that turns out to be the main harmonic issue of the piece as a whole. The tonal answer then comes, and the tonal answer seems to be, if anything, in a kind of E minor, maybe G major, since we end that passage ends on G7, but more likely, again, probably oriented towards E, I would say, which is the melodic high point here. So there's harmonic ambiguity, I would say, primarily between C and E, but G seems to be another candidate here. Here's the more extended version of the three-note motto. And the harmonization that Stravinsky gives here doesn't exactly solve our problems. So the harmonization for the first note here embeds both C major, C, E, G, and E minor, E, G, B. So there's a kind of seventh chord there, C, E, G, B, that contains both C major and E minor. And the cadential chord here, again, doesn't exactly solve our problems. Is it a C chord? Is it a G chord? Not entirely clear. Now, the first theme itself goes like this. As I've analyzed the melody here, the orientation towards C is pretty clear. Once again, as is usual, the melody moves within a tetrachord, in this case from C down to G, within that perfect fourth, and so the melody seems to be oriented toward C major. Of course, the melody starts with that somewhat ambiguous three-note motto, but as it continues, it sounds like C major. But the harmonization really doesn't confirm that very well. Look at the notes of the harmonization. And all of this steady, or not quite steady, accompaniment, there's only two notes, and those two notes are E and G. Well, E and G belong both to E minor and C major, so the ambiguity we discussed with regard to the motto seems to be in full force within the theme. If I force you to choose, you'd probably say, well, it's probably oriented mostly towards C, but the E is a very strong countervailing presence, and I've summarized that here in what I call Model 4, which poises C against E. All right, so after the first theme in C, let's call it that because that's going to simplify our lives, we arrive at a kind of transition point. We haven't yet gotten to the second theme. Here is music that comes before the second theme, leading into the second theme. Standing on the dominant, there's a pedal D, which sounds like 5 of G minor, and we think the music is going to move to a second theme in G. That's what a sonata form is supposed to do. Pedal on D throughout, but when we finally get to the second theme, it's not in G. It's in F. So we have a movement that so far, let's say, has started in C. It moves through D to F. So that perfect fourth from C to F should alert you that something motivic is probably going on here. Here's the end of the exposition. And the exposition at the end comes on E. So as I've summarized here, first theme on C, transition on D, sounding like 5 of G, but the second theme when it comes is in F, and the exposition ends on E. So there's this motion from C to E in the exposition. The very same dichotomy we were attentive to within the motto between C and E is now composed out over the course of the exposition. And we get a kind of motto form here, C, F, E, which is the same type of trichord as the motto itself, which was B, C, G. So here's how the exposition ends on E. And then a silence before the development begins. And so the exposition ends with this pretty strong conventional cadence, 5-1 in E. So we have this large scale composing out of the motive, and we have an exposition that instead of positioning tonic against dominant, positions C against E as competing tonal centers. At the very end of the movement, where we turn to now, the first theme returns in a coda, but the accompaniment is going to be slightly different. We think we've gotten ourselves a definitive arrival in C major, which I'll call out when it comes, but instead of settling there, the movement actually ends with some loud percussive chords. Here's the coda with its first theme recall. Ambiguous as the C and E. But then we get a definitive arrival on C in the bass, and we think it's all over, a quiet C major ending. No. Okay, in the recall of the first theme within this coda, we once again have this ambiguous accompaniment on E and G. The melody is made, if anything, more ambiguous because instead of leaping up to C, it leaps up to E. So the tension between C major and E minor persists all the way almost to the end. The bass moves down, arriving, as I noted, on this low C, which is sustained. At this point, we have a C major chord. It sounds like a nice, quiet, sort of fade-out ending on C major. But then the piece is violently disrupted by these chords. Here are the two chords by themselves. So the very final chord of the movement is our old friend, that C7 chord, embedding both C major and E minor. There's E in the bass, which undercuts the sense of centricity on C. There's E here, so is the ending a C major ending or an E minor ending or some kind of combination of the two? Not entirely clear. In the fourth movement of the symphony, our three-note motto comes back very slow. We'll listen to that. I want you to pay attention to the harmonization of the motto here. This is one of these typically beautiful extended Stravinsky codas where musical material from earlier in the movement is presented for a final time, much slower, often in the registral extremes, up high, in a kind of chorale format as here. So that's our three-note motive, B, C, G. Goes all the way up to D at that point and jumps back down. Three-note motive again. That's a beautiful ending. Once again, we think we have a fairly definitive ending with C in the bass, but it's slightly undermined at the end. E is back in the bass. You've got a sense of C major, E minor, and G major all sort of packed in simultaneously. It's beautiful, open scored, white note music, but some of the issues, harmonic issues that we've been tracking since the beginning of the movement remain in force till the very end. All right, we change now to the concerto for two pianos. There is a fugue, which you see in front of you. The fugue subject forms the theme for a set of theme and variations. So here's the fugue with its 17-note subject. An answer for the fourth higher. So that 17-note tune with different rhythms and different registers is going to come back as the theme for a set of variations. And that's interesting in a number of ways. First of all, that Stravinsky is interested in fugue and imitative counterpoint. That's not such a consistent concern of his, but it's something he turns to a number of times. There's also a kind of proto-serial thinking here, which is you've got a 17-note tune, not specific necessarily as to rhythm or register, but functioning more in the manner of a pitch class series. I also observed that the opening notes of the subject are not only a tetrachord as usual, but a tetrachord that's been very familiar to us since Les Noces. In fact, the first three notes of Les Noces, that tetrachord comes back now in Les Noces, but it's the first tetrachord that we hear in the beginning of Petrushka. So Stravinsky has not only certain shapes that he likes, but also certain pitch locations that he's quite fond of. All right, so here's the first of the four variations that are going to make up this theme and variations movement. This is an unusual piece in that the theme, that fugue subject, comes after the variation. So now we've backed up to movement 3, and here's the first of the variations, and we'll listen to it. And as you listen, you can see that I've noted the notes of the subject with these numbers, and that this runs, you can see the numbers here running throughout this variation. That's the end of the subject. Harmonically, we're in the usual complicated Stravinsky land. Here, I would say poised between G minor and B flat major, two pitch centers, a minor third apart, quite typical for Stravinsky. At the end, there's a kind of extension of the motive, the opening three-note motive via what I'm calling rich, and I'll explain that more in class. But you can see it's D, E, G, that's +2, +3, overlapped with, starting on E, +3, +2. That repeats, +3, +2, and now extends, +3, +2, +3, +2. The motive, the opening three-note motive, is extended into a long chain in this way, an RI chain, and again, I'll explain more about that in class. All right, here's my more formal analysis of that first variation, which I'm showing again via model 3 as involving, we're missing some accidentals here. It should be actually this is, I'm not sure what the heck happened here. It's a conflict between G minor and B flat major, as I said earlier. And in the melody, there's this there's this tetrachord that we talked about, E, D, C sharp, B. Oh, so that's what I'm doing here. So I'm imagining this as G in the harmony and E in the melody. That's what's going on here. Here it is again. So a G-centered harmony and an E-centered melody. That's model 3. Here's the second variation. Again, the fugal subject runs through this. Everything is transposed up 8 semitones, and toward the end it's transposed up 9 semitones. So at the end there, it's transposed up a semitone from where it was at the beginning, and the fugue subject is going to be stated once again. All right, variation 3, a different harmonic environment. We're sort of in C sharp minor here. Once again, the fugue subject is the tune here, starts here. Again, registrally very, very different from its original presentation, rhythmically very different from its original presentation. And once again, we get this little RI chain in the middle here, up 3, up 2, up 3, up 2. So that seems to be a way that Stravinsky likes to extend one of his basic 3-note motives by enchaining it with itself. Here's the fourth variation. So the harmony is back on, let's say, G minor, the way it was at the beginning of the first variation. The melody, however, has been transposed, and now it moves within the perfect fourth between C sharp and F sharp. So we have this kind of Model 1, rather significant chromatic clash between a harmony centered on G and a melody centered on F sharp. All right, here's a slightly different piece. I want to talk about the concerto in E flat, known as the Dumbarton Oaks Concerto. And I want to bring the conversation back a little bit, or maybe we're continuing a conversation about 3-note motives. So let's listen to this passage, and I want you to focus on this 3-note motive here, B flat, D, and E flat. And then transposed. It was a 3-note motive involving a perfect fourth with a semitone on top, and that should remind you very much of the motto from Symphony in C. The first movement of this concerto ends with the passage that's shown over here. This passage involves a couple of layers of ostinato. It's purely white note music in, let's call it E flat major, but there's a 7-note ostinato in the bass and a 6 beat ostinato in the upper parts. So we're tonally quite secure. It's clearly E flat major, but the ostinati conflict with each other. This passage will end, as you'll hear, with a transitional passage to the second movement. I'm leaving it here, not because I intend to talk about it here, but it's just too beautiful to leave out. Here we go. And then this lovely transitional passage, descending fourth in the bass, leading to the dominant, it sounds like, of B flat, the key of the second movement. All right, so this is Stravinsky's white note mood here. E flat major, clearly totally diatonic, no accidentals at all, and yet rhythmically incredibly lively, not just because of the running 16th notes, but even more because of this sense of unbalance and conflict between the different layers of the piece.